Hi, I'm Ryan Ashley, and today we're going to make a Peyote Stitch Bar Necklace. For those of you who are thinking of getting started with Peyote Stitch but aren't sure where to begin, this is a very simple, beginner way to get started with one of my favorite techniques. Let's go ahead and look at what you're going to need today. You'll need a flat nose plier, a bent chain nose plier, round nose plier, flush cutter, 2 different colors of DELICA beads if you want the contrast, a small piece about 1.5 inches of 20 gauge wire. You can also use 18 or 16 gauge wire. I have Nymo thread, but fire line will also work just right. Beading needles, this is size 10, they're very flexible, great for beadwork. Bench block, hammer. And here you see I have a little bit of inside out Scotch tape. That's to keep my beads just within reach. And then you'll also want to grab some chain or a silk cord or leather or something to attach your bar to when you're done so you can wear it around your neck. First things first, let's go ahead and create the bar portion of the necklace. So I'm going to show you here. This is what we're going to be creating. So you see there's a metal bar, and then over top of the bar is just a little bit of peyote stitch wrapped around, and then it's easily attached to a chain. So go ahead and grab your 20, 18, or 16 gauge wire. Grab your bench block. Here we go. And we'll go ahead and give it a light hammer just to get it firmed up. Now I'm going to create my little loops on either side. I go about 1/3 of the way up in my round nose plier. Just easily wrap it around. It's not quite a 90-degree angle, so I'm going to reposition my tool, bend this backward to create a nice stem. And then I think I'll do it pretty close to the other one. I want a nice kind of short, simple piece. So right about here, I'm going to bend it back again. Go about 1/3 of the way up. Bend this wire back. Reposition, bend it a little bit more. And then I'll go ahead and snip this, being careful to keep my hand on the wire so it doesn't fly up. Let's see here. And then I'll go ahead and reposition this just a little bit using my bent chain nose pliers. Here we go. Give it a nice kind of consistent look. And I'll do a little bit more hammering just to give it some additional texture. Now when you hammer, the molecules of the metal spread out, causing these little loops to open up a little bit. We'll just close those right back up after we're done. Perfect. So now I'll grab this and just do a little bit of adjusting just to get that nice crisp angle. You'll want to cut a string, whether it's Nymo or Fireline, of I would say about 1.5 feet, 2 feet max. I don't want your string to tangle, so don't get too much. And then go ahead and grab one of your needles. Now it seems impossible to thread this needle, but just pinch it really closely in your fingers if you don't have a threader. And then put the eye of the needle right over top of it. And as you open your fingers, that string should just push right through. There we go. Perfect. And I pull a long tail. Now on the other end, I'm going to go ahead and grab one of my beads and string it onto the edge, the end of the string. Okay. And then right around there, I'm going to tie just a single knot around the bead. This is your anchor bead. It'll make sure nothing falls off as you're working. So I hold the bead and I just tie a single knot. Okay. You want to take this out later. That's why I'm not doing a double knot, making this permanent. We want this to just be temporary. So now that I'm here, how many beads do I start with? Well, the size of this determines that. So I'm going to put a few beads on my needle and then hold it up against our bar and make sure it's the right width. So I'm going to start just with my lighter colored beads. gonna start, I wanna do an even number for sure, so let's start with 6. I could probably do 8. Let's see. Okay, perfect. So now that we're here, I'm going to go ahead and add a contrasting bead. This will be the beginning of our next row. So I add 1 bead on, and I want it to stack right on top because we want to create sort of what looks like a stack of bricks. So I won't go through this bead, I'll go through the next bead. Why? Because I want those 2 at the end to create that nice stacked look. So I pull it down, and this looks really wonky, and that's totally fine because it's just the beginning. I'm gonna pull this down and kind of hold it in place, hold everything really taut, and then pull tight. And I want it to create that nice stacked look. So that's perfect. Now I want to do the rest of the row. So I'm going to repeat this step. Oops, this little first one just always gives you a little extra work. Let's see here. I'm going to repeat that step by pulling another bead on. Just going to use that light pink. And then same way I did in the very beginning, I'm going to skip this next bead and go into the next one. So you're doing every other. After you get this first row done, it's very obvious where the beads go. So this is the only time you're really going to have to think about it a little bit. But you can already see this shape beginning to form and sort of the stacked brick look. So now I'm going to add another bead, maybe another pretty contrasting one. Make sure I'm working on the correct side. See, I started with this contrasting one on the end, so that tells me which side I need to be on. There we go. So now I do the same thing. I'm going to skip this bead and go into the next one. Okay, so I'm getting to the end of the row and I realize there's this one kind of hangout bead just out there by itself. And I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and realized I totally forgot my 8th bead. So this will happen to you, it's totally fine. We're just gonna pretend that little bead isn't there and then just go about our business, and we'll have a little bit of a shorter piece this time. But this is just good to know. It's really not a big deal unless you have like a very specific width you're going for, but this will be great for us. So now I'm just turning it around and going to the next row, grabbing a bead, and now it's apparent exactly where you go. You don't have to think about it because you can already see where those beads are. Like you can see the little peaks and the valleys. There's only a spot for the bead to go. You can't really put it anywhere else. That's what I love about Peyote Stitch. Once you get through that first row or two, it becomes really clear what to do, and it almost becomes like meditative. So I love that you can get into it and kind of just not even think after the first couple rows. So now I'm just going to continue working like this. I'm going to randomly add some of those contrasting beads. I'm going right into the beads that are kind of sticking up. And then the beads I add are sitting right in those little valleys. So we'll do this again. And then I'm going to do just a few rows of this, and I'm going to wrap it around the bar to see if it's the right size, and then we'll show you how to finish it. Okay, so I just want to show y'all something real quick. You see how on one side I have 1, 2, 3 rows, it looks like, and then on the other I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Before we can finish our piece, we need to make sure those are the same. So what does that mean? It means I need to add 1 more row of beads before we get to the point of wrapping it around our bar and seaming it all together. So we'll just do one more row here. And I'm really, that first bead on the beginning of each of your rows, you really want to make sure that's taut. Otherwise, you might have a little loosey-goosey piece of peyote stitch. And by the way, if yours is loosey-goosey and it's your first or third time doing this, that's perfectly fine. It'll get more consistent as you go on. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this by wrapping it around the bar. I'm holding up the bar, wrapping this around. And it looks like I probably need just 2 more rows. Yeah, it's not quite meeting. So we'll do 2 more rows and then we'll seam it up. So this is my last row. I'm pulling this through. This will surely fit around that bar. So now I'm going to go ahead and remove this tape just so I have a little bit more dexterity as I finish this piece. And I'm going to wrap it around the bar. And you see how everything just looks like it's about to just zip up, just like a zipper. That's how you know you have the exact right number of rows. They're even on both sides and it meets in the middle just like that. So now all I have to do is kind of literally zip them up or sew them up. So I take this and I go right across through that bead. So I kind of go over and through. And then I'm going to create a kind of a zigzag shape or follow a zigzag shape. I go into the bead closest. Okay, there we go, pull it tight. And then the bead closest that's sticking up is right here. So you can see I'm going back and forth in a zigzag shape. Okay, and then same way here. And then across. And then across. And now remember, you have those couple of little beads hanging off the other side if you did it wrong like I did in the beginning. And so I don't want to sew into those. I just want to come right across and put my needle into the bead on the other side. So let's see here. I'm going to kind of pull that tight. And then I'm going to do what's called weaving it in, because I want to make sure we don't just tie a knot and cut right here. Because if something comes loose, then your whole thing falls apart. So we're going to actually stitch into this piece just a few times, and then we'll tie a knot. We'll do this with both ends. If you're a knitter, you're definitely familiar with this from a knitwear technique or perspective, because you know that the whole thing will unravel if you just knot it and snip it and something gets loose. So this just makes sure that your beautiful, hard-earned project stays exactly the way you meant for it to. Okay, so I'm not securing anything. I'm literally just kind of following the shape and sewing right into the peyote stitch. Now I'm going to leave this alone, and I'm going to take off my anchor bead and that little extra bead from the beginning. I put my needle just right through the bead and kind of pulled it off, so that was easy. And I'll pull the other one off. And now I'll do the same thing on this end, and then my goal is to kind of get to the same spot as the other thread so that I can tie my knot and snip it. So I thread it the same way, pushing it between my fingers into the eye of the needle. And then I start going right into the beadwork. Toward that other string. And now, you see they're right next to each other. So if I tie a knot here, it won't stick out, it won't be obvious, it'll just kind of sit right into one of these grooves, be basically invisible. I'm just going to tie a double knot. So there's one part of the knot and then the second. Okay, and I'm going to snip it. Now, a little trick of the trade, if you have an X-Acto knife or a box cutter or something like that, you can get really, really close to that. I'm just going to use some normal flesh cutters right now. You could use thread snippers, you can use sewing scissors, whatever you like. But this works pretty well. So now this is really fun because you can turn this into a bar necklace. You can hang it from an ear wire and maybe add another dangle to the bottom. You can make a ring out of it. There are so many options. Okay, I hope you learned a lot and you're excited about creating your first or maybe your fifth Peyote Stitch project. Let's go ahead and walk through the tools and supplies one more time. So today I used a round nose plier, a bent chain nose plier, flat nose plier, flesh cutter, size 10 flexible beading needles, 15-0 DELICA beads in 2 different colors. I used Nymo thread, but you can also use Fireline, a bench block, a hammer, of course a little bit of 20 gauge or 18 gauge wire, and my favorite, Scotch tape. Tell me, what is going to be your first Peyote Stitch project? Just drop a note in the comments below. And if you want to go ahead and pick up the tools and supplies like the ones I used today, check out the description and you'll find all the links you need there. While you're down there, please don't forget, like, subscribe, and ring that bell so that way you get notified every time we have something new to share. Thanks so much and have a good day.